The crystal glasses chimed softly as laughter drifted through the dining room of the house I had spent nearly 3 decades paying for. Every chair around the table was filled with smiling faces, yet I had never felt more alone inside my own home. My name is Margaret Collins, and at 68 years old, I had learned that betrayal rarely arrived with shouting. More often, it came dressed as a smile. My son, Daniel, sat across from me, quietly slicing his steak while his wife, Rebecca, stood with a wineglass raised high. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she announced brightly. "Daniel and I have worked so hard to build this wonderful life." The guests applauded politely. Rebecca's eyes drifted toward me. "And of course," she continued with a small laugh, "we appreciate Margaret for letting us stay here." A few people smiled awkwardly, then she added the sentence that changed everything. "Honestly, she's not really family anymore. She's basically just our landlord." The room froze. A nervous chuckle escaped someone near the end of the table before quickly dying away. I didn't look at Rebecca. I looked at my son. Daniel lowered his eyes to his plate, as though studying the mashed potatoes had suddenly become fascinating. He didn't defend me. He didn't object. He didn't even pretend she had gone too far. His silence hurt far more than her words. 3 years earlier, after my husband Richard passed away, Daniel had convinced me to let him and Rebecca move into the house. "Mom, you'll hate living alone," he had said. "We'll help take care of everything." At first, it sounded comforting, slowly. However, things changed. Rebecca redecorated every room without asking. Family photographs disappeared from the walls. Richard's favorite leather chair was moved into storage because it looked outdated. The kitchen became hers. The living room became hers. Even my master bedroom became theirs after Rebecca insisted climbing the stairs would be easier for me from the downstairs guest room. Each change seemed small on its own. Together, they erased me. Meanwhile, I continued paying the property taxes, insurance, utility bills, internet, landscaping, groceries, and nearly every household expense. Whenever Daniel thanked me, Rebecca quickly reminded him they were saving for their future. Apparently, their future simply didn't include me. I had ignored dozens of little insults over the years. Tonight wasn't little. I reached for my glass. It contained only water. Standing calmly, I offered a gentle smile. "Perfect," I said quietly. Every face turned toward me. "If I'm only the landlord," I paused long enough for Rebecca's confident smile to begin fading. "Then please don't ask your landlord to keep paying your bills." Silence. Rebecca blinked. Daniel finally looked up. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I mean exactly what I said." My voice remained calm. There was no anger, no tears, only certainty. I placed my napkin beside my plate. "I hope everyone enjoys dessert." Without waiting for another word, I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, conversations remained frozen. Inside my bedroom, I closed the door gently. For several minutes, I simply stood there. The house felt strangely peaceful. I opened the top drawer of my oak dresser and removed a thick blue folder. Inside were years of bank statements, priority records, insurance policies, durity accounts, automatic payment schedules. Every dollar I had quietly spent supporting 2 adults who believed I existed only to make their lives comfortable. I spread everything across the bed. For the first time in years, I examined my finances without thinking about what Daniel or Rebecca needed. Instead, I asked myself one question: what do I need? The answer surprised me. I needed respect. I needed peace. Most of all, I needed my life back. Outside, I heard Rebecca laughing loudly, trying to convince her guests that I was simply being dramatic. Daniel said nothing. I smiled to myself. People often mistake kindness for weakness. They assume the person who stays quiet will stay quiet forever. They never notice the moment silence becomes resolve. I picked up my phone and began making a list: utilities, household account, meals subscriptions, start access, garage, master bedroom. Every privilege they enjoyed existed because I allowed it. Tomorrow morning, that arrangement would begin to change. Not through arguments, not through revenge, simply through boundaries. And unlike the promises I had accepted from my son 3 years earlier, these boundaries would not be negotiable. The next morning, I woke before sunrise as I always had. For years, my mornings had followed the same routine. I brewed enough coffee for everyone, prepared breakfast, packed leftovers into containers, and made sure the kitchen looked spotless before Daniel and Rebecca came downstairs. Not today. I measured just enough coffee for a single mug. The rich aroma filled the kitchen while dawn painted soft shades of orange across the backyard. Carrying my cup, I settled at the island with a newspaper and enjoyed something I hadn't experienced in years: silence. At exactly 8 o'clock, Daniel wandered into the kitchen wearing wrinkled sweatpants. He rubbed his eyes and reached automatically for the coffee pot. He frowned. "Mom, did something happen? You forgot the coffee." I folded my newspaper without looking up. "I didn't forget." He glanced around the kitchen. "So where is it?" "I made enough for myself." Daniel looked confused. "That's it?" I nodded. "The coffee beans are in the cabinet. You're welcome to make your own." He stood there for several seconds as if I had spoken another language. Before he could answer, Rebecca entered carrying her phone. She opened the refrigerator, then the pantry. Her expression tightened. "Where's breakfast?" "I haven't made any." She laughed sarcastically. "You're still upset about last night?" I calmly stirred my coffee. "I'm simply adjusting to my new role." "What role?" "The landlord." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Oh, come on." "No," I replied. "Landlords provide housing. They don't cook breakfast." Daniel sighed. "Mom, she didn't mean it like that." I looked directly at him for the first time. "You sat there while your wife told a room full of strangers I wasn't family." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I wasn't interested in excuses anymore. Instead, I opened my laptop. Rebecca noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" "Reviewing household expenses." Within seconds, I logged into the account connected to every automatic payment I had created over the last 3 years. Meal delivery service canceled. Premium grocery subscription canceled. Weekly house cleaning service Rebecca insisted they needed canceled. Streaming accounts I never watched canceled. Rebecca stepped closer. "What are you doing?" "Reducing unnecessary expenses." "You can't just cancel those." "I can." "They're ours." I smiled politely. "No, they're mine." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we're moving a little too fast." "We?" His shoulders dropped. I continued typing. Electricity remained. Water remained. Internet remained. Everything else that existed purely for their comfort disappeared with a few clicks. Rebecca grabbed the back of a chair. "This is ridiculous." "I agree." "What? I should have done this years ago." Neither of them spoke. After finishing my coffee, I washed my own mug, dried it, and placed it back inside the cabinet. I didn't wash theirs. By lunchtime, the sink had begun filling with dishes they assumed someone else would clean. That someone had always been me. Around 4 that afternoon, I printed a single sheet of paper. I placed it neatly on the kitchen counter. Daniel found it first. "What is this?" "A notice." He read aloud, "Beginning Friday at 5 p.m., the garage will be reclaimed for homeowner use. Any personal belongings remaining inside after the deadline will be considered abandoned property and removed." Rebecca snatched the paper. "You can't be serious." "I rarely joke. My exercise equipment is in there." "I know." "My holiday decorations." "I know." "My storage bins." "I know." Daniel looked uneasy. "Mom, can't we talk about this first? We've had 3 years to talk." Rebecca crumpled the paper. "I'm not moving anything. That's your decision." "You wouldn't actually throw away our belongings." I met her eyes. "Don't test that assumption." She stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door so hard a picture frame rattled in the hallway. Daniel remained standing in the kitchen. He looked exhausted. "I wish everyone would calm down." I almost laughed. "For 3 years, Daniel, I stayed calm while pieces of my home disappeared." He stared at the floor. "I didn't realize things had gotten this bad." "You didn't realize because you never looked." His silence confirmed what I already knew. He hadn't been cruel. He had simply been comfortable. Comfort has a dangerous way of blinding people to someone else's sacrifice. That evening, I prepared grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, enough for one person. Rebecca walked into the dining room and stopped. "That's all you made?" "Yes." "So what are we supposed to eat?" I looked up from my plate. "I imagine whatever 2 independent adults decide to cook." She stared at me in disbelief. Daniel quietly opened a food delivery app on his phone. For the first time in years, they paid for their own dinner. As I finished my meal, I couldn't help noticing something remarkable. The food tasted better than it had in a very long time. Not because of the recipe, because it had been prepared without resentment. Friday was only 3 days away. Neither of them had touched a single box in the garage. I suspected they still believed I would eventually give in. They were about to discover that kindness and weakness had never been the same thing. Friday arrived with bright sunshine and an unusual sense of peace. I woke early, watered the flowers along the front porch, and enjoyed breakfast while listening to birds instead of complaints. When I glanced through the kitchen window toward the garage, I noticed exactly what I expected. Nothing had changed. Rebecca's exercise bike still occupied the center of the garage. Plastic storage bins were stacked from floor to ceiling. Old furniture, unopened shopping bags, and holiday decorations filled nearly every corner. For 2 years, my sedan had remained outside in the driveway because there wasn't enough room inside my own garage. Today, that ended. At precisely 5 o'clock, I unlocked the side door and walked into the garage carrying a clipboard. I took photographs of everything. Not because I wanted an argument, because experience had taught me that facts were always stronger than emotions. A few minutes later, a truck from a local donation center backed into the driveway. 2 friendly workers stepped out. "Good afternoon, ma'am," one of them said. "Ready?" "I am." They carefully loaded every unclaimed item listed in my notice. Anything that obviously belonged to Daniel, mostly a few toolboxes and fishing equipment. I placed neatly against the back wall. Rebecca's abandoned belongings filled nearly 3/4 of the truck. By 6:30, the garage stood almost empty. For the first time in years, sunlight reached the concrete floor. I smiled as I climbed into my car and slowly drove it inside. The garage door closed behind me with a smooth mechanical hum. It sounded like freedom. Just after 7, Daniel and Rebecca returned home. The front door slammed. Seconds later, I heard Rebecca scream. "What happened?" Her footsteps thundered toward the garage. "No," she stood frozen in the doorway. "My things!" Daniel looked around in disbelief. "The garage. It's clean," I answered calmly as I stepped inside. Rebecca spun toward me. "Where's my exercise bike?" "It was collected this afternoon." "My decorations?" "Collected." "My storage bins collected." "You threw away my property." "I followed the written notice I gave you 3 days ago." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "I thought you were bluffing." "I wasn't." Daniel rubbed both hands across his face. "Mom, we honestly believed you'd wait. I already waited." "For what?" 3 years. Rebecca's voice became louder. "You had no right." I folded my arms. "I gave you 48 hours. We've been busy." "So was I." She looked around helplessly. My grandmother's old rocking chair. I placed it in the downstairs guest room because it clearly had sentimental value. She hesitated. For the first time, her anger lost a little momentum. "You saved it?" I had no interest in destroying meaningful possessions. Silence filled the garage. Daniel finally noticed my sedan parked neatly inside. "You put your car in here?" "Yes." He looked embarrassed. "It should have been there all along." "Exactly." Neither of them had an answer. That evening, I enjoyed a quiet cup of tea in the living room. Upstairs, I could hear Rebecca complaining for nearly an hour. Daniel barely spoke. Late that night, after they went to bed, I walked upstairs with a tape measure. There was one final space in the house I intended to reclaim. The master bedroom. It had once belonged to Richard and me. Every memory of our marriage lived within those walls. After his passing, Rebecca insisted she and Daniel needed the larger room because they planned to start a family someday. I had reluctantly agreed. Instead of becoming a nursery, the room became Rebecca's luxury dressing area. Half the closet held designer handbags. The bathroom counters overflowed with expensive cosmetics. Meanwhile, I squeezed my belongings into the smallest guest room downstairs. No more. The following morning, while Daniel and Rebecca enjoyed a weekend getaway they had planned weeks earlier, 2 professional movers arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. Everything happened calmly. Every item was carefully wrapped. Every piece of furniture was moved without damage. My antique oak bed returned to the master suite. Richard's reading chair found its place beside the window again. Our wedding photograph once more rested on the dresser where it had remained for 28 years. I stood quietly in the doorway after the movers left. For a moment, I simply looked around. The room felt familiar, like meeting an old friend after years apart. Downstairs, Daniel and Rebecca's furniture fit comfortably into the first-floor bedroom. Smaller? Yes. Comfortable? Also yes. I labeled each box neatly and photographed every room before locking the master bedroom door. I wasn't preparing for revenge. I was preparing for accountability. Late Sunday afternoon, I heard their car pull into the driveway. Suitcases rolled across the porch. A few moments later, a sharp gasp echoed through the hallway. "Daniel!" Rebecca's voice cracked. "Our bedroom." I quietly turned another page in my novel. The conversation I had been expecting had finally arrived. Rebecca's scream echoed through the hallway with enough force to shake the silence I had come to treasure. "Daniel, come here right now!" I remained seated in the master bedroom, finishing another paragraph of my novel before calmly placing a bookmark between the pages. Heavy footsteps pounded up the staircase. A moment later, someone knocked sharply on the bedroom door. "Mom," Daniel called, "open the door." I unlocked it and stepped aside. The moment they entered, Rebecca's face burned with anger. "You had absolutely no right to move our things." I looked around the room. "Our things?" She folded her arms. "You know exactly what I mean." "No," I answered evenly. "This has always been my bedroom." Daniel sighed deeply. "Mom, couldn't we have talked first?" I smiled sadly. "I tried talking for 3 years. Neither of them replied. I walked to the window overlooking the backyard. "When your father was alive, we painted these walls together. We chose every piece of furniture together. Every corner of this room holds memories of our life." I turned toward them. I gave it away because I believed sharing my home would bring our family closer. Rebecca avoided my eyes. Instead, I became a guest in my own house. Daniel lowered his head. "I never thought about it that way." "I know." There was no bitterness in my voice anymore. Only honesty. Rebecca finally spoke. "This still feels extreme. Does it?" I opened the bedside drawer and removed a neatly organized folder. "I prepared something for both of you." Daniel accepted it cautiously. Inside were several printed pages. "What is this? A rental agreement?" Rebecca laughed. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." Daniel slowly read through the document. "Monthly rent, utility contributions, internet, property maintenance, shared household responsibilities." Everything was listed clearly. His eyebrows lifted. "This is a lot. It's considerably less than market rent in this neighborhood." Rebecca snatched the papers. "This is ridiculous. It reflects what living here actually costs. We're trying to save for a house, and you've been doing so with my retirement savings." Daniel looked embarrassed. I continued quietly. "For 3 years, I paid nearly every household expense while the two of you built your savings account." Rebecca shook her head. "Families help each other." "They do," I nodded. "But families also show gratitude." Silence settled over the room. I pointed toward the final page. "You have 2 choices." Daniel looked up. "You may sign this agreement and begin contributing beginning next month. And if we don't, you'll have 30 days to find another place to live." Rebecca stared at me as though I had become someone she no longer recognized. "You'd actually make your own son leave? I would encourage my adult son to build his own home." Daniel closed the folder slowly. "Can we have some time?" "Of course." I left them standing in the bedroom while I went downstairs to prepare dinner for myself. The following week passed quietly. No signed agreement appeared. No rent payment arrived. No apology came. Instead, life continued as though they expected me to lose my resolve. I didn't. Tuesday morning, I visited an appliance store. By afternoon, a compact refrigerator had been delivered to my bedroom. The next day, I purchased a locking pantry cabinet. One shelf held coffee, another stored snacks. Fresh fruit, vegetables, meats, and dairy products filled the refrigerator upstairs. The kitchen downstairs remained nearly empty. Friday evening, Daniel stood staring into the refrigerator. "There isn't anything to eat." I rinsed an apple beneath the faucet. "I bought groceries yesterday. Where are they?" "In my room." Rebecca entered just in time to hear my answer. "You locked away the food. I secured what I purchased." "You expect us to starve?" I nearly smiled. "I expect 2 employed adults to buy groceries." She threw her hands into the air. "This is unbelievable." "No," I replied calmly. "What's unbelievable is how long I convinced myself this arrangement was normal." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "We've just been busy. Everyone is busy." I carried my groceries upstairs. Behind me, I heard the front door close. An hour later, they returned carrying several inexpensive grocery bags, frozen dinners, instant noodles, canned soup. For the first time in years, they had shopped with their own money. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was responsibility, and responsibility, while uncomfortable at first, often became the greatest teacher of all. That night, as I locked my bedroom door, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a real estate agent I had contacted earlier that afternoon. She was available to meet the following week. I smiled quietly. The next step of my plan was finally beginning. The following Wednesday, the doorbell rang shortly after noon. I was watering the flowers on the front porch when a pleasant-looking woman stepped out of a silver SUV carrying a clipboard and a camera bag. "You must be Mrs. Collins," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Linda Harper from Harper & Stone Realty. Thank you for coming." As we walked inside, Daniel came downstairs, adjusting his tie after working from home all morning. He stopped when he saw the stranger. "Mom, who is this?" Before I could answer, Linda extended her hand politely. "I'm here to evaluate the property for listing." Daniel's face drained of color. "Listing?" Rebecca hurried from the kitchen. "What listing?" I folded my hands calmly. "I'm selling the house." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Rebecca finally laughed. "That's not funny." I wasn't trying to be. Daniel looked at me in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I've already signed the paperwork authorizing Linda to begin marketing the property." Rebecca shook her head rapidly. "You can't sell our home." I met her eyes. "It isn't your home." The room became painfully quiet. Daniel stepped closer. "Mom, we've lived here for 3 years, and I have lived here for 31. Rebecca's voice cracked. "Where are we supposed to go? I imagine you'll rent an apartment while you continue saving." "That's impossible." "No," I answered gently. "It's what millions of adults do every day." Linda sensed the tension. "If this isn't a good time, I can return later." I smiled reassuringly. "No, Linda, please continue." She began photographing each room professionally, the dining room, the kitchen, the backyard, the staircase. Daniel watched in silence while Rebecca paced the living room. The camera shutter echoed through the house like the ticking of a clock, counting down to a future neither of them had expected. 2 days later, the for sale sign appeared on the front lawn. Rebecca refused to look at it. Daniel stared through the front window for a long time before quietly leaving for work. Neither of them mentioned the sign. A week passed, then another. The house attracted several interested buyers. One Saturday afternoon, a young couple toured the property. They admired the spacious kitchen. They loved the large backyard. Before leaving, they smiled at me. "This feels like a home." Their words stayed with me because for the first time in years, it did. 3 weeks later, Linda called. "We have an excellent offer above asking price. I'll accept it." Closing was scheduled for the following month. That evening, I handed Daniel and Rebecca written notice confirming the moving date. Neither argued. Reality had finally replaced denial. Without my financial support, purchasing another house wasn't possible. Instead, they found a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. Moving day arrived beneath clear blue skies. Professional movers loaded furniture, while Rebecca quietly packed the last kitchen box. She looked exhausted, older somehow. When everything was finished, she approached me holding a ring of spare keys. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I accepted the keys." "Thank you." She hesitated. "I should never have spoken to you the way I did." "No, you shouldn't have." She nodded with tears in her eyes before walking toward the truck. Daniel remained behind. He looked around the empty living room. "I failed you." I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You forgot that helping someone should never become depending on someone. I'm ashamed. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I already have." His eyes filled with tears. "But forgiveness doesn't restore trust overnight." He nodded slowly. "I understand." After one final hug, he climbed into the moving truck. I watched until it disappeared around the corner. The driveway stood empty. So did my heart. But unlike before, the emptiness felt peaceful. 6 months later, I settled into a beautiful condominium overlooking a quiet city park. It was smaller than the old house, but perfectly suited to my needs. Large windows filled every room with sunlight. Fresh flowers decorated the dining table. Richard's favorite chair rested beside a bookshelf overlooking the trees. Every item inside belonged exactly where I wanted it. I joined a gardening club, started watercolor classes, made friends who appreciated my company instead of my generosity. Daniel called once every few weeks. Our conversations became honest, Sybil healthy. He and Rebecca had learned to budget, cook, clean, and manage every expense on their own. One afternoon, we met for lunch. When the bill arrived, Daniel reached for it. I smiled. "We'll split it." He smiled back. "Fair enough." As I walked home beneath the warm afternoon sun, I realized something important. Peace isn't found by winning arguments. It's found by refusing to surrender your self-respect. I unlocked the front door of my condominium. The quiet welcomed me. No demands, no resentment, no feeling of being invisible. Just a home filled with dignity. I poured myself a cup of tea. settled into Richard's old chair, and watched the sunlight stretch across the floor. For the first time in years, every room reflected the person who owned it, and so did the life I had finally reclaimed.